Hello, my friends. Jerry Rosa here at the Rosa String Works Workshop, and it is Good Friday, and I have a little song to kind of commemorate the occasion. I hope you'll enjoy it. Oh, I'm just not myself, although I look the same. The portrait that I used to be is in a different frame. I feel this sudden strength, though I'm as helpless as a child. And you may see me grinning like it's going out of style. The things I used to treasure, they just get in the way. And the people I once hated, I love them more each day. And that frown I'm used to wearing has been turned upside down since Jesus came into my heart and turned my life around. He lives in me. He lives in me. He bought me with a price, now I no longer am my own. My life is his kingdom, my heart is his throne. He lives in me. He lives in me. The King of all heaven and earth is living in me. Now even when I'm tempted, good and evil are at war. The battle's getting hotter than it's ever been before. I know where my strength lies, I can't do it on my own. And I get reinforcement 'cause I never am alone. He lives in me. He lives in me. He bought me with a price, now I no longer am my own. My life is his kingdom, my heart is his throne. He lives in me. He lives in me. The King of all heaven and earth is living in me. Oh, he lives in me. He lives in me. He bought me with a price, now I no longer am my own. My life is his kingdom, my heart is his throne. He lives in me. He lives in me. The King of all heaven and earth is living in me. Yes, the King of all heaven and earth is living in me. Well, happy Easter weekend to you all. And speaking of Easter weekend, you're in for a real treat because I'll be putting out a video with my young 9-year-old student, Cash, singing the Easter song for you this year. The song is called He Took Your Place, and we'll release that on Sunday morning. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. Cash did a bang-up job on it. It's just nearly a miracle how much he's turned around in just about 2 months' time. 2 months ago, he couldn't have done it. It's just amazing how well he's doing now. So anyway, moving on, it's 30 degrees today here on the farm. It's like, hello from the Arctic, because 30 degrees Fahrenheit is 2 degrees below freezing Fahrenheit. Must be just a little below zero on the Celsius scale. But anyway, it's cold. And, people say things like, one fellow made the comment, he says, I would trade locations with you. I'm down here in Florida, it's 90 degrees. I'm good. Well, you don't understand. I've burnt 4.5 trailer loads of firewood in the last less than like 10 days, 2 weeks. And, that firewood had to be cut by hand. So I'm pretty sure you'd be trading back in just about a day or so. Anyway, I'm over it. It's 5 months solid, 2 times a day minimum, sometimes 3 to 5 times a day because how cold it was. I was out there throwing wood in that furnace, and that's about 2 contractor wheelbarrows full each time you go out there. Whew, I am done. I am over it. I'm ready for some warmer weather. I don't want it to get hot. I don't want it to be 90 like down in Florida. I don't want that at all. But 60 would be just awesome. Anyway, moving on. So let's see. I've already told you about Cash doing the Easter song, and yeah, I'm excited for you to hear that. He really did a knockout job, I think, for a 9-year-old boy that is playing and singing all by himself. He pretty much killed it, I think. The video for this coming weekend, well, for tonight or tomorrow, is probably going to be I haven't even produced it yet, but it's going to probably be a combination of a mandolin that I did and the banjo I did. Those were the last 2 instruments before my hiatus, and my so-called hiatus to get away from working on instruments. Anyway, I didn't get much on the banjo, but hopefully I've got quite a bit on the mandolin, and so we'll combine those into probably one video and let you see that this weekend. My wife went out mushroom hunting yesterday, so did I. I found 0, she found 6, and so let's see here. Here's a look at what she found when she brought it back in the house. As you can see there, it's a mushroom that was growing through a hole in that old rotted limb there, or rotted piece of wood, and but you can see the mushroom just growing right up through that hole, which goes to kind of proves my point. They'll grow pretty much anywhere. Yeah, I find them on rocks. I find them in sand. I find them everywhere. And people say, "Oh, you got to look in this certain spot. You'll never find them." I find them everywhere, up on top of my hills. Yeah, it's crazy. So there's no such thing as they only grow in this particular spot. Now, I will tell you, they do grow here, at least. Your main place to find them is around old elm trees, especially dead elm trees. That's the main place to find them around here, though they do grow in other places too. Let's see, I mentioned in the title that we were going to show the sawmill, so this is just a very short video of kind of where my current status on the sawmill. So here you go. Well, there's what she looks like after I get all the wood on there, the riser. I raised it up about almost 2 inches, well, between 1.75 and 2 inches. So, and they're all there. I got tools laying on top of them here now, but they're all the way down through there. Everywhere that a log would lay, I've got it raised up. And so, I think that concludes everything I really have to do. There's probably a few other little minor improvements I could make. After using it quite a bit now, I kind of know the goods and the bads, and overall it's pretty good. It's the only thing that I would say is kind of a negative is that it's really slow to go up, and when you're going down it's not that big a deal because you just go down one board at a time. It's nowhere near as fast as one of the commercial units in terms of adjusting the up and the down, but it is just as accurate and maybe even more accurate because that screw is allows you to be very accurate on your ruler. So anyway, it works pretty good. I'm anxious to get it out now and try it. So I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah, in hindsight, I'd have probably been better off just buying one, but they're so darned expensive to get a good one, Of course, this one's just kind of the lower end model anyway when you get right down to it, but it does a good job. It cuts lumber, and I've cut a lot of lumber with it. So anyway, moving on, we got about, I think, 18, questions and comments. Some of them are just comments, but we'll start off with Omer Landry. He's from Capelli, New Brunswick, Canada. He says, "Hi, Jerry. Really enjoy your channel. What is your take on guitar humidifiers?" I'm almost thinking this is a setup. Let me just put it in very short sentence here. Wood is, when they make a guitar, before they make a guitar, they dry the wood down to 6% moisture content. For people who don't know, 6% moisture content is considered very, very dry wood. It's very dry wood. It's not like it's sort of dry. It's got, it's got 6% moisture in it. That's very dry, okay? So understand that 6% is very dry. Can it dry a little bit more? Yeah, probably. Will it dry a little bit more? Possibly. Can it get a whole lot wetter? You betcha. Because when you cut the tree down, it's like 60% moisture, maybe 80% moisture, depending on the species. I mean, it's just dripping with water. In fact, you can hold up a log and some of them, you'll see water drip right out of the end of them. So can they get a lot wetter? Yes. What is the reason to want to soak your wood down? It isn't going to dry out much more, but it can sure swell up a lot. And if you swell it up, all you're going to do is crack your finish, crack your joints, all that stuff. People think that all gets cracked because it dried out, and it doesn't. It gets cracked because it swells up. That's all I got to say about it. I'm not in favor of humidifying, except under certain circumstances. There are always certain circumstances. But on the general rule of thumb, no, I don't think you need to humidify it. Just keep your instrument in a very comfortable living space. Do not keep it in a real wet basement. Do not keep it in a real hot attic. Do not keep it right next to your wood stove. Do not keep it right next to a furnace vent that's blowing all the time. Anything like that. Keep it out of the extremes and you're fine. That's my word on that. Anyway, Michael Andrus says, Jerry, last shop talk you gave us the thickness measurements for your sides and bridge. Can you please tell us the thickness for the top and back of a guitar? Well, just in general terms, it's right around 1/10 of an inch, about 100,000ths of an inch. It's just right in that. I don't even know that I get it exact every time. I just try to get it about that thick, about 1/10 of an inch, about 100,000ths. I get them pretty close every time, I really do, because I do measure it in thousandths. If I'm doing, now that's on your typical standard, spruce type top. Now if I'm doing redwood, which is quite a bit softer, I'd probably go to 105,000ths. Now 5,000ths is not very much. It's the thickness of a piece of paper. But when you spread that out all over the whole instrument, 5,000ths is relatively significant in that case. So that's roughly where I go with it. Moving on, Michael Berkmeyer. Finally, after my 5th neck, I figured out how to use the carbon paper on the dovetail. Now, could you please show us how to install a truss rod in the bottom of a sound hole? That's what he says, in the bottom of the sound hole. I guess he means in the bottom of the slot, I guess. At least I guess that's what he means. Maybe sometimes I read these things wrong. Anyway, the truss rod, first of all, it ought to have a little underbow in it. If you're making your rod from scratch. Now, if you're buying a commercial rod, they generally have some way to compensate for this, but some of them are just plain straight. If it's just a plain steel bar, that's not going to get it done, in my opinion. You don't want just a straight steel bar in there for a truss rod. You want this end to be, I guess, in line with, you want each end to be kind of in line, if you will. Then in the middle, between the two ends, you want a dip. Now, I'm exaggerating the dip a lot, but you want a slight dip in there between them. And that way, you anchor this end, and you got your bolt or nut on this end, and you tighten this up. Well, that lifts the middle. That pulls the middle up. So really, putting it in the slot is really not very difficult. You just got to make sure that bow fits to the bottom, and then on each on the underside of that truss rod, on each end, there's going to be a gap. And I lay my truss rod on its side, and on a piece of wood, I trace that curve, and then I cut a little wedge on each end to fill under the truss rod. Then I do the same thing on the top of the truss rod. With that bow, I cut a filler piece that matches that curve of that truss rod and the ends of the truss rod. So in other words, the truss rod's encapsulated tightly in wood all the way through. And that's how I do it. It's really not that tough. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, really. But you definitely want a little bit of an underbow. How much underbow? You know, whatever you can kind of get away with. You don't need a ton, but you need some, because that some lifts it and keeps that, because naturally the strings are going to pull an underbow into your neck. And that's what the truss rod's for, is to lift that back up so it doesn't allow the strings to pull that underbow in there. That's all the truss rod does. Truss rod has nothing really to do with your action. You know, so many people still to this day still think truss rods adjust their action, make it play better, it can affect your action. That's the way I like to say it. It can affect your action, but it doesn't really, it's not the thing you want to be messing with to adjust your action. You want to adjust your action at the nut, you want to adjust your action at the saddle, and all you want to do with your truss rod is keep your neck straight. That's all you want to do with a truss rod. Period. That's all it does. No matter what anybody else says, I don't care what forum tells you different, it's wrong. That's all the truss rod does. Sweet tea, sweet lemonade mix. My Arnold Palmer again. I like the comment, a few Shop Talks back, somebody says, I'd much rather have the John Daly. Not me, I don't drink. I drink sugar. And lots of people say, well, that's why you gain weight. And I've gone on that kick already too, where I didn't drink any sugar for 6 months, didn't lose 1 single pound. I do not believe that the sugar is the issue. I do not believe it at all. The issue is eating the breads and the cookies and the cakes and those things. That's where you get your pounds. And when you cut those things out, the pounds start dropping. And I've been dropping for a year, or since the first of the year. So anyway, moving on. Hope that helps you on your truss rod question there. Here's the username is The Flash, said he's the one that said he would trade locations with me because it's been 91 in Florida. And like I said, my wife would take you up on that instantly because she's freezing all the time. So she would love the 91. In fact, when she walks under a shade tree, and I'm not making this up, you'll think I'm exaggerating. I promise you I'm not. I have seen her walk under a shade tree on a 90+ degree day and go like that, like she's cold. I'm not kidding. It's nuts. So she would love the 91, and she'd trade with you in a heartbeat. But I'm pretty sure you'd trade back in about 5 minutes after you cut, 4.5 trailer loads of wood every 10 days. Yeah, it's nuts. It's just nuts. Clyde Lewis, glad you're enjoying your hiatus, Jerry. Hope the weather will warm up a bit. My question is about your router base for the Dremel. Was it a StewMac base that you modified for better view when routing, or was it a base that someone made for you that has more of a notch to allow better view? Thanks. Glad your finger's better, he says. Well, Clyde, it is a base that someone made for me. And honestly, it doesn't have that big of a viewing thing. It actually has a small viewing thing. And, for the kind of work I do, I think that's perfectly fine. I usually don't need very much of a view because, I'm doing very tiny work all the time. And even when I'm routing the slot, that's still tiny work. And this is big enough for me. I mean, that's not a very big hole, but it's big enough for me. Where the advantage of this one is you plug in right here and you have an LED light in here that shines down. Now that is killer. That LED light is where it's at. you can get away with a small hole, especially when you have that LED light. A fellow in one of the Scandinavian countries made this, and I'm ashamed I can't call his name. I try to write the name down on the stuff, and I somehow didn't write his name down on this. And you know me and names anyway. Even when I know the name, I can't think of it, and I just can't remember his name. I will say this though: if he ever decides he wants to go into business and sell these things, I'll be his dealer here in the States and won't charge him nothing. I'll deal him for free. I mean, seriously, and I'll promote him. I'll do his commercials, because this thing is killer. It's really awesome. He did a wonderful job on it. So it's spring loaded here, so it's a plunge router base, and so that's the first thing. That really is nice to have the plunge router. And then what's really the best part of it, besides the light, the best part would be this depth gauge. So you can drop this down. So like what you do, the way I use it is you get your cutter, like when I'm doing a bridge, especially a bridge. Well, actually I do it for a lot of things, probably everything. But on a bridge as an example, I'll get my cutter touching the top of the bridge. Then I'll drop this down to where, like I'll put a 100,000 spacer in here, and I'll drop this down to the 100,000 spacer, tighten it down, pull the 100,000 spacer out. Then I can plunge this down 100,000ths of an inch. So I know I'm exactly 100,000ths of an inch deep into when I cut the slot, if that makes sense to you. And then, I usually want to be at least 200,000, so I just repeat the process. I put, from where it's at there, I'll reset this again, put another 100,000ths in there, tighten it down, then plunge it down another 100,000. So in other words, I can control the depth very accurately with this. So that's very good. And like if I'm doing actually inlay work, well then I'll put a 50,000ths spacer in there, and I can control my 50,000ths very accurately then. And typically, and I say 50,000ths because that's typically the depth that I do inlay. And most inlay shell pieces are cut at 50,000ths, or they used to be. They probably are cheaping out on those now and probably making them 40,000ths. Who knows? I don't buy very much of that stuff because I've got a whole bunch of it from years gone by. But anyway, this is a killer router base, and it was made by a fellow up in one of the Scandinavian countries. I want to say Denmark, but I'm not sure that's right. But anyway, he did a wonderful job, and I'll make videos for him for commercials on how wonderful that thing is if he ever decides to go into business and sell them, because it really is a great base. Moving on, let's see here. Henry Miller, you typically say that the bridge should be a little lower than the fretboard. On one of my guitars, the bridge is much lower than the fretboard, with the saddle making up the low bridge. Though it's not really a neck issue, as the string height at the 12th fret is dead on. Is this a problem? Will it affect the tone of the guitar? Well, Henry, there's, in my opinion here, first of all, I don't really have enough information to diagnose your issue, because it could still be a neck issue. I mean, it could still be, but it could also be a bunch of other things. But it could be that your neck angle's wrong. If your neck angle's wrong, you're going to have a taller saddle. That's just the way it works. I mean, or if your neck angle's wrong the other way, then you're going to have to cut your saddle way, 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 way down if you can cut it down that far. And that's usually the problem. Generally, the necks get pulled up, and so then you have to reset the neck to get the angle down. But if it's too far down, then you've got a much higher saddle. So that's when you say it's not a neck issue. The fact that you got a taller saddle compensates for the neck issue. So there's not enough to go on there to know what your particular problem is, because it could also be that your bridge is lifted up, or you got a belly there, or a brace broken, or something else. I mean, it could be a combination of a bunch of things too. So anyway, it could still be a neck issue based on the information you've provided so far. And will it affect the tone of the guitar? Well, yeah, because, I mean, it's that point of diminishing return again. Generally speaking, and you know, you got to remember, take everything with a grain of salt, guys. Any extreme is not good. Almost any extreme on instruments. So generally speaking, a taller saddle is better than a low saddle. And the reason being is because then your break angle from your string coming down to your pin is steeper, and it puts more pressure down on your top, which gives you more volume. But at a certain point, when you get it a little bit too high, then it starts to sound like you're playing in a barrel again. It doesn't really transfer the sound efficiently. So, you know, there's a point of diminishing return. I don't care what you do on instruments, there's a point of diminishing return. You make the sound hole bigger, it's a little bit better. You get it too big, not so good. You know, everything's like that on an instrument. I don't care what you do. Like if you go, well, I can put these big frets on. Well, you get them so big, well, then there's a point of diminishing return there. There's negatives and positives with everything. I hope that makes sense to you. Henry, and you know, does it affect your tone? Well, it might. I mean, it just depends how tall your saddle is. If it's not crazy tall, then it's probably just fine. But if it's sticking up a 1/4 inch above your bridge, you're in that territory. You're in the ballpark. If it's a 1/4 inch above your bridge, you're on that bleeding edge of it may be affecting your tone. I see that someone gave me a super chat here. I'm trying to see who that is. Bill Hyder, thank you very, very much, Bill. I really do appreciate it. I didn't say it this morning, but again, I elected not to have mid ads in the video today. In other words, they can run ads during the middle of the video, and I elected to not do that. So I appreciate the super chats. Thank you very much. Because whenever I elect to not have ads, I'm losing money. So thank you. Let's see. The next one here is looks like C.I. St. Clair. Hi Jerry, or hey Jerry. I removed a lifting bridge from an acoustic guitar with a colored veneer top, blue and quilted maple, and there was a lot of chip out and damage around the underneath. And then he says, LOL. I did what I could and got it back to playing, but feel I could have done better. What's the best way to get the bridge gluing surface flat again? Pictures would help, I'm sure, but just imagine, I'm not really, it says, I'm sure, but just imagine crappy when dealing with them veneer layers. Thanks, longtime viewer. We love your channel. Thank you. Well, okay, C.I. St. Clair. Well, you must be psychic, because probably the next video I put out, not this weekend, but maybe next weekend or sometime during next week, the next instrument video after the one this weekend will be about this exact topic. Well, or at least it won't be about the topic, but it includes the topic. Let's just say it that way. This is, you know, I told you that Tuesday night, you know, someone else made the, I'll get to that comment later. I don't want to spoil it because it's a good comment. But anyway, Tuesday night, I told you that someone brought this guitar, he's a good friend of mine, to the jam at the restaurant, and he wanted me to fix it. Now, the story is that he had already taken it to one repair person, and the guy says, nope, ain't gonna touch it, ain't gonna do it. So then he took it to another guitar repair shop, supposedly Martin factory authorized, which means nothing, guys. I don't, you know, you may think it sounds like, you know, like I'm trying to, I don't know. I'm not, there's nothing negative in that comment. It just means that it means nothing to be factory authorized. That's what it means. It really means nothing. But anyway, he took it to a second factory authorized Martin repair shop. And the guy says, oh yeah, I can fix that, no problem. Now keep in mind the bridge is pulling off of it. So he kept it like 10 or 11 days, and my friend called him back and says, have you made any progress? And the guy says, nope, come and get it. I don't think I can do it. So I'm the third person to get it, and you can see the bridge is already off of it. Took me 20 minutes. So anyway, it wasn't that bad, but the bridge was coming off of it, and it was glued to the finish around the edges like typical. And so I haven't stripped that part yet. But the question was about the tear out. Well, this one had tear out too. Can you tell where the tear out was? I mean, there's quite a bit of tear out, but there's really no evidence of it there now. What you're seeing is glue and stuff. Actually, there is a teeny tiny bit of tear out right there, where my finger is there. But this whole section tore out, this whole great big section right there, and I've already put it back. And so the idea about that is, typically when you have tear out, it's stuck, your tear out is stuck here. That's where your tear out is. Now this wasn't bad anyway. Honestly, I wouldn't have even had to replace it because it was literally paper thin. But what I did when I have tear out like that, and I would prefer not to have any, of course, just like anybody, well, then you just take this and you just start working it in. You take your flat razor blade like this, and you start working it under there, and you just work it, and you 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 work it. I mean, it's not easy, but you can shave that off of there. Then I just take it and put Titebond on it, and well, I put Titebond on the top of the guitar where this came out of, and then I just lay this on there and keep it flat. And I usually put plastic on it and then either clamp it or put some weight on it or something like that. And that's what I did in this case. I just put some weight on it. But anyway, that's how I fill them when I can. I have had cases where I've actually had to put other pieces of wood in there. Sometimes it's because somebody else has already taken it off and there's just big tear out, or there's all those stupid holes that Gibson drills in there. A lot of times creates a problem, so I'll fill all those too. So I do a lot of other filling, and in those cases I just fill it with extra wood, and I just, you know, you're better off sometimes whenever you have a tear out and and it's a jagged tear out, you're better off just taking a little Dremel router and just routing it, keep it small, keep it as tiny as you can keep it, but route it out square and straight so that the sides are straight, and then just cut yourself a new piece of wood that'll fit it nice and snug, just like a glove, and fit it down in there, glue it, and then just sand it off, plane it off, whatever it works for you. With me, I would probably use my finger planes and plane it smooth to the top. And then you don't have any tear out anymore. And it'll be just as good as it was brand new before you ever touched it. So I always try to fix the tear out if it's any kind of significance at all. If it's not a big deal, then I don't really worry about it. Like that little bitty piece that's still missing, it's paper thin and it's just a little tiny piece. It's not even worth trying to fix it. So, other than that, I try to fix it though. If it's a fairly big piece or very deep, I always try to fix it. And like I said, you're better off just taking a router and doing it that way than to try to, you can't ever match some jagged tear out. You just can't match it. So just square it all off and flatten it all out and then put a new piece in there and you'll be fine and good to go. Hope that makes sense. Moving on, Linda Long, this is a comment. She just made a comment that says, "Hi Jerry, the Eastman octave mandolin is a dream to play. Can't hardly put it down. Thanks for all the videos and your wealth of knowledge." And then another fellow, David Garagosian, said Eastman guitars are also top-notch. So they're referring to the comment I made in yesterday's vlog video that I said, if you're looking for a new mandolin, I would very highly recommend the Eastman mandolins. I'm at the point now where they're just about as good as it gets, really, when it comes to off-the-shelf mandolins. Those Eastmans they're pretty darn hard to beat, really. And I don't know what their prices are because I don't buy them, but I do know that if you can afford one of those or find one of those used, you're probably in good shape. We got 139 viewers. Our viewer counts are going down, doggone it. I don't like that, but we'll keep it up for a while. If it drops off a whole lot more, though, maybe it isn't worth doing. If nobody watches them, it's not hardly worth doing. Moving on, Andrew Whiteman. He says, started building mandolins. Do you have an order of construction for mandolin? Order of operations. Well, Andrew, not so much an order, but more of a thought process. I like to get the hard things out of the way up front, and I like to catalog, I don't know, something, compartmentalize, that's the word. I want to compartmentalize it. In other words, I work on this piece, and I get this piece as good as I can get this piece. Then I set it aside. Then I take the next piece, and that's how I do it. And instead of trying to think of I'm building a mandolin, I'm building a top, or I'm building a neck, and that's all I'm building. You know, I'm not thinking about building a mandolin yet. And I really do think of it that way because it's a lot less daunting. And you'll find you'll get through it a lot faster too, because when you're just concentrating on one thing and that one piece, you'll get that done in no time, and then you're on the next piece. So that's how I do it. And the order of operations for me typically is I'll do the top first or the back first, either one of those two, set it aside, then I go to the sides generally, and because I do want to get the top and the back on the sides as quick as I can so that nothing distorts. And then I get the neck done right away and get that all together and then put the back on. So it is kind of in that order, but that's just me. Probably if I really would recommend the optimum order would probably be more like this. The optimum order would probably be more like make your sides, get those done and out of the way, keep them in the mold after you get them made so that they don't distort and change shape. Then maybe make your neck, and then make your top, and then put all of that together and get it, you know, locked. I mean, if you're trying to be absolutely optimum, to keep things from distorting and changing shape, I don't really have that much problem with that anyway, but I'm just saying, if you're trying to be optimum, this is probably the optimum. Then put those three things together, your neck, your sides, and your top. Then make your back and put your back on. And then it's all one piece, you know, you got it all together then. And the only reason I say that's the optimum is because if you do carve your top and you let it set for months and months and months, you know, depending on humidity, moisture, things like that, it can change shape a little bit. Generally, that's going to be that it drew more moisture if you're in a humid area. But anyway, that would probably be the most optimum way to do it, even though I don't necessarily do it that way, because I'm usually pretty fast. I mean, like, if I get a top done, well, then another day I'll have the back done, and then another day I'll have the sides done, and, you know, that kind of thing. For me, what takes the time is all of the detail. The detail's where all the work is. Making just a top, or making just a back, or making just a neck, sides. The sides are 2 to 3 hour project max. The top is 3/4 of a day project, and the back is a full day project just because it's harder. And then the neck is a 5 or 6 hour project. I mean, that's really kind of the way it works for me. So I'm really fast at it. So I don't really feel like I need to, you know, do it in that optimum order that I just mentioned to you. But if you're new at it and if you're slow at it, then I would say you probably should go with the optimum order, which would be sides, neck, top, back. There you go. David Roddy, he says, how does the Ibanez compare to the Eastman mandolin in your opinion? Well, David, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but honestly, I'm not impressed with Ibanez mandolins. The few I've seen, they didn't do it for me. So I just have to say it that because you asked me. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. That's not it. I'm sure there probably are a few really good Ibanez ones out there. It's just that on the whole, the Eastmans are circles around them. Someone else just made a super chat. Dave's World. Thank you very much, Dave. I really do appreciate it. White Dragon, he made a comment. He says, he gave me, this was the comment I was telling you about earlier, he gave me 2 weeks for my hiatus before I'd go back to working on instruments. He says, now it sounds like it should have been more like 2 days. And I'm saying, well, really, the truth of it is it's more like 2 hours. Because I put the video out saying that, hey, today's my hiatus. It was Tuesday, you know. And then that afternoon, I go to the jam, and here I'm greeted at the door with a, could you fix this guitar? So that hiatus didn't last very long. So, you know, your 2 days could be shortened quite a bit, I think. Anyway, it's just the way it is. Here's another comment from Nancy Milwaukee. I'm not sure how to pronounce that exactly. Milwaukee, I think. Milwaukee, I think that's better. Nancy Milwaukee, a Canadian viewer. She says, I recommend Jerry and his family to be Canadian citizens. Because I mentioned in the video yesterday, I might as well live in Canada if I'm going to have the Canada weather, you know. So thank you, Nancy. I appreciate the recommendation there. Although you'd have a tough time getting my wife to go any further north. She's all about going south. And I mean, like, she's all the time on me. Can't we just go to, you know, Arizona or something for the winter? Anyway, let's see. Alonzo Casada. Hi, Jerry. When using the rubber inner tube for gluing binding, do you think it's possible to break the top and sides? I've seen watermelons explode with people using rubber bands. Well, yeah, you have a very good concern. It's definitely legitimate. But if you're building it properly, and if you're not using, again, here's that point of diminishing return. Anytime you go to extremes, you're going to have a problem. Well, I don't go to extremes. I don't feel like I'm going to extremes with the rubber band. I mean, I'm not pulling it as absolutely as tight as I can get it. I am stretching it a little bit, and it does put a lot of torque on there. But if the instrument is built properly and built correctly, then I don't think you're going to have a problem. Sure, if you put even more wraps and more, you could bust it. There's no question you could bust it. So you got to be careful. You got to use your good common judgment and sense. But yeah, it's a legitimate concern, and I have thought about the concern. And I just saw another super chat, and that would be Michael Buss. Thank you. And Dave's World says prayers for the family, and Michael Buss says, hi Jerry, I'm having real trouble bending maple binding. It just keeps cracking and splitting. Should I live with it and just fill the cracks? Well, Michael, I feel your pain. The world's finest mandolin ever built by a human had the super curly binding on it. Oh my gosh, you're talking about a pain in the neck. Yeah, you know, if you're just using regular maple without the curl, it shouldn't be too hard to bend that. Now, if that's what you're using and you're having trouble, then you're just experiencing the normal trouble that you have with binding. All binding is hard to do, especially wood binding. All wood, real wood binding is hard to do. The super curly maple binding is exponentially harder to do, especially on the tighter curves of a mandolin. Oh my gosh, on a mandolin, it's just next to impossible. And that's just the bottom line truth of it. On a guitar, it's very difficult, very difficult. I've done guitars with the curly maple binding, and they're very difficult. So I feel your pain, man. The only thing I can say, there's only a couple of hints I can give you. One is that you want to make sure that that you've got it as thin as you can get it. In fact, with maple binding, I'm finding that you can actually go probably 4 or 5 thousandths thinner than you think you need to. In other words, like let's say you have a 60 thousandth slot to fill, you could probably go to 55 thousandths with your maple, because when you wet it down and everything, it's going to swell up. So it's going to fill that 5 thousandths, no problem at all. So my point is that you can probably go a little bit thinner than you've been going, is the first thing. Second thing is you want to make sure it's absolutely glass smooth. Get it just as smooth as you can get it, because any line in there at all is going to cause a crack, especially on that really curly maple. And then the third thing that I can tell you is that you definitely want to use a piece of metal to bend it. You definitely don't want to just take the binding and try to bend it. It will not work. You need to take a piece of metal, put it around the binding, pull on the metal, and, you know, as you're bending it around the heater to bend it. If you just try to pull on the wood, you don't have a prayer that it's going to work. It isn't going to work at all. So I hope you're using the metal technique like you've seen in my videos, because that's the only way you're going to get it to work. That's about it. Hopefully that'll help you, because I definitely feel your pain on that. I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know if we got another super chat there or not. It seemed like I saw something else pop up. Nope, I don't think so. Okay, moving back to where I was here. If I can find it. Okay, Edward Krasinski is the next one. He says, just wanted to thank you for getting me hooked on Itchy Boots. Her ride through the Sahara Desert is fascinating. All her travel vlogs are supreme. If you don't know who Itchy Boots is, you just Google, or just you know, go into YouTube and type in Itchy Boots, just like it sounds. And Itchy Boots is a lady that rides a motorcycle all over the world. She rode from South America up to Alaska. She rode through Africa. She's ridden everywhere. And she's got more guts than Carter's got liver pills. And that is a true statement. She does stuff I wouldn't even begin to think about doing. The really cool one, I mean, I had been watching her a long time already, but the time when she rode her motorcycle over this bridge in South America, I think it might have been Ecuador, I can't remember. But anyway, it was over a bridge, and this bridge is at least 100 feet high, if not higher. And it's just riddled with holes. There's barely any room on the bridge at all to get across it. I wouldn't even walk across that bridge, and she rode her motorcycle across it. There ain't no way. When I saw her do that, I thought, oh my gosh. That's when I think I started recommending her channel, was when I saw her do that. And even now in the desert, she does stuff there that there's no way I would do that. And I mean, the stuff she eats and drinks too, because I'm real picky on the food thing. Yeah, no, I wouldn't do any of the stuff she does. One day they were out on the Amazon River, and they said, "Oh, we're going to stop for lunch," she says. The one, you know, native to the area person, he climbs up this tree, and this tree is way out, leaning way out over the Amazon. And he gets way up, and you wonder what he's doing. You think he's going up there to pick some kind of nuts or fruits or something. And all of a sudden, you see this lizard come spiraling out of the tree, and it just falls, you know, and falls down in the water. Well, then the other guy grabs it or whatever, and that's what they had for lunch. And she doesn't balk at anything, man. She just does it. So, like, if you haven't watched her, you'll enjoy her watching her, and especially catch up on some of her old videos. You'll like that too. All right, moving on. Nico. Hi, Jerry. I bought a classical guitar a while back, and it resonates a lot on an A note, open and noted. I know you carved the top braces so the top doesn't resonate on an open note. Is there any way to correct this on a completed guitar without taking it apart? This may apply to acoustic guitars as well. Looking forward to your thoughts on this. By the way, I am a Dutch guy that calls you Opa. He's the one that calls me Grandpa. Yeah, well, thanks. I need to be reminded I'm a grandpa. Enjoying your videos for a long time. Keep up the good work. Greetings from the Netherlands. Well, Nico, you know, I don't know if I can help you with that. I mean, yeah, I mean, I kind of sort of know what, I mean, I know what you're talking about for sure. And I kind of sort of have some ideas, but I don't know for sure that they'll work. The only way I can think of it would be to recarve, you know, through the sound hole, try to recarve some of the bracing, but I hesitate to suggest that and to recommend that. But I don't know of another way really to modify it too much. Trying to think if there's anything you could do physically, like different strings or different things, different saddles and things, and I can't really think that anything like that's going to help too much either. If anybody else has a good idea, put it in the comments, but I honestly, Nico, I'm not so sure I know what to tell you on that. Yeah, I really don't. You know, I try, whenever I'm, you know, I'll just digress and go a little deeper, dive into what he's talking about there. Whenever you're carving an instrument, like on mandolins, you're carving the whole top and you're carving the whole back, and it's all hand carved, inside and outside. Now on a guitar, it's not. It's you know, you basically just have a flat board and then you put braces on it and you carve your braces. Now some do have a little bit of an arch, and there are arch top guitars that are carved. Okay, so I can't cover every single thing in every statement I make, but my point is that for guitars, for the most part, they got a flat top, so you're not really carving the top on the guitar, and you are carving the braces though. And whenever you're carving any instrument, mandolin, violin, you know, guitar, you want to tap on it and listen to the note and check what note it is. And I typically don't want it to land on an open string note. In other words, on a guitar, you know, any of the open strings that you're using, you don't really want your note to land there when you're tapping on it, because that will be the note that will resonate the most on your guitar. So I really, on mandolins, for instance, I try to generally land around a B flat. That's a perfect place to be, and they go there fairly easily. Most all my instruments land on about a B flat on my tops. And that way it's not an open string on your mandolin, see? And so that's kind of what you're going for on your guitar as well. And you can carve it and change it by the way you carve it. And how to explain that is kind of complicated. You know, where you carve it, in other words, in the middle or the outside, where you carve the braces, you know, all that has something to do with it. And that's, yeah, you can write a book on that. And I won't even try to pull any wool over anybody's eyes. I don't necessarily think I'm the expert on that anyway. But I mean, I feel like I'm very successful at it, and I typically always land on my B flat note for my mandolins, so there you go. Don't ask me what note I try to go to on the guitar. I try to work it out so that it doesn't end on an open note. Like wherever my top is, I try to go flat or sharp of that open note. In other words, like let's say I'm on an A. Well, I'll try to either get to an A sharp or an A flat. You know what I mean? So there you go. So I don't really have a standard note for the guitar that I can recall. Okay, moving on. Dottie Hildebrandt. Hello, Jerry. My question might sound rather stupid, but I don't think I have any talent. Although I have a banjo and play it, it sounds nothing like the CD sounds. My question is, why do you know, so that's just comments there. That wasn't her question. So her question is totally different. My question is, why do you have frets on the instruments? I hear you say that you take off the little ones on the mandolin and sand the fretboard down to look like it never had them in the first place. I think those are for show. I love your videos, even the ones on the farm. Well, thank you, Dottie. There are no stupid questions, and outside of my YouTube world, I have made exceptions for that. There have been people throughout my life where I think I have made an exception to that statement, there are no stupid questions. but not here on YouTube. There are no stupid questions, Dottie, and your question is valid. So the question is, why do we take these frets out down here and then we scallop it down and we try to make it look like the frets were never there? And that's exactly the case here. Well, the reason you take those frets out is there's, like right here, there's only, 40 thousandths or less pick clearance right here. So right here, as you're going back here, then these frets are sticking up. Well, your pick hits those. Now, I'll be honest, for years, I played them with that, and I didn't really notice it that much. But once I did take the frets out and scallop one down, I can't play them like that anymore. I can't play them with the frets there. It bugs me big time. I hear that tick, 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 tick all the time because my pick's always hitting that. So that's why I pull them out and I scallop this down. And lots of players do that. So you might say, well, why don't you just cut the whole thing off? Why do you even need it? Well, you don't need it. It's just a style thing. The Lloyd Loar mandolins from back the Gibson days and Orville Gibson back then, they had this style. And so it's just a tradition at this point. It's just carried forward. And I like the look of it. I just don't like the feel of it. So that's why we cut it out, Dottie. It's not a, it is just a decoration fret. That's all it really is, because I wouldn't say Chris Thiele couldn't play there. He probably could. I can't play there. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Moving on, Bill Evans. We're running out of time here again. Bill Evans, he told me, he said, this was just a comment. He obviously doesn't know me. He says, Bill Evans says, go carnivore for a month and you'll lose weight. And within that time, you'll lose all the weight I can't read. You'll lose all the weight you want within that time. Just 30 days, you'll be amazed. Well, Bill, you obviously don't know me. I have been carnivore since the day I was born. Period. I don't eat a single vegetable at all. None, not even that much of any vegetable. None, zero. I don't eat a pickle. I don't eat a piece of lettuce. I don't eat nothing. And I was born a taster, and it took me till I was a senior in high school to figure out what the problem was, because everybody thought I was just picky and weird. But even the doctors, when I was an infant, said, oh, he'll eat when he gets hungry. He's just not hungry. Well, the only thing they could get me to eat as a baby, now, you understand, now this is before you can talk and think and all that, and speak and tell people what's good and bad. The only thing they could get me to eat at that time was milk and mashed potatoes. That was it. And you might say, well, you just said mashed potatoes, that's a vegetable. Well, I'll eat the 3 or 4 starches. I'll eat mashed potatoes, I'll eat corn, I'll eat rice. That's pretty much it. I can get carrots down. I'm not crazy about carrots, but that's it. That's it. So there you go, Bill. I got you beat there, buddy. I've been a carnivore my whole life. The problem is I do like the cakes and the cookies and the sweets and things like that also, and that's what I'm cutting out. And you're right. You are correct, though. The carnivore diet will definitely cause you to lose weight, and it is, because I've cut out 99, well, I've cut out, let me say, to be real truthful, I've cut out 95% of the other junk. Still drinking my sweet tea, though. Mitzi Oden. She was here the last couple days. You saw her in the video, I think, was it yesterday's video or day before? I can't remember. I can't keep it straight. Day before, I guess. Mitzi said, I am very happy with the results of your work on the mandolin and the guitar, Jerry. Thank you again. I enjoyed jamming with you and the group. I also enjoyed my stay in the Airbnb. Very nice. Well, thank you very much, Mitzi. And by the way, folks, I put a link to Mitzi's channel. She's only got one video out there, and it was several years ago, but she did a real nice job singing I'm a Ghost in This House. So check that video out if you get a chance. I have a link in the description of this video today. Well, let's scroll up and see how many of these questions we can get to. We'll try to get them all here. It's already 9 o'clock. Lots of people from all over again. I can see lots of Canadian folks there. Ronald Todd says, Jerry, how long did you have to warm up to sing that this early in the morning? Well, Ronald, I probably should have warmed up. You know, that's the question right there. Zappa says your audio sounded a bit coarse. Yeah, these microphones, I mean, they're good and bad. You can overdrive them really easily, and I don't know. All I know is I probably was overdriving it, and that's probably the reason. Whenever you sing loud or talk loud, they spike. Let's see. Moving down, Ronald Todd, Jerry, how? Oh no, that was it. That was the same one. Did that come twice, or did I just scroll up twice? I don't know. No idea. Swartzy says, hello, Jerry. Could you recommend any device for buying a fret crowning file, or any advice? I tell you, I cannot read. Any advice on buying a fret crowning file? Well, I don't have a lot of experience with other crowning files. All I can tell you is the one I use is from StewMac, and it's the one with the interchangeable blades. I've got quite a few blades for it, or I call them blades. They're not blades. I don't know, files, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, they're interchangeable, and this one here is the medium one that's on there right now. It's medium recrowning, and this one here is much wider recrowning. And on this wider one, I also ground off the edges on both sides and rounded them off, because I found that sometimes these would dig into the fretboard. So I rounded those off a lot. But this is the one I use. I'll be honest and tell you, it's not that easy to use. You got to get a feel for it. You can come off the fret pretty easy with this thing and scratch your fretboard. So it takes some practice. Honestly, everything looks so simple in the videos, and there's some real tricks to that thing there. You'll be surprised how tricky it is. But that's the only one I've got experience with, so that's the only recommendation I can make. And there may be other people that could make a better recommendation. If so, make your recommendation out there in the comments, please. Paul Akers, do you put a hard edge on a guitar saddle, or do you round the top of the saddle slightly? I leave an angle on it, just like the angle that's on your nut. Your angle on your nut is angled towards your peg head, like that. Your angle on your saddle on the back, I angle towards the tailpiece, or towards the pins, I guess you'd say. I only put I think it's a 12-degree angle, I think is what I use. So on the saddle, a 12-degree angle. I do not want it peaked in the middle, and I don't want it rounded or anything like that. And you might say, well, why? Well, for one thing, it's easier to control your intonation. You got to realize that most of the time when I'm putting a new saddle on, well, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of the time when I'm putting a new saddle on, I'm actually cutting the slot and everything. I'm setting the intonation. It's easier to control your intonation if you have just one point of contact and it's a known point. In other words, that leading edge, or that inside edge of that saddle, is the last place that string makes contact. So I can use that as my line of intonation then. And I use my intonation rig to set that. So that's why I prefer it that way. I know that when they come from the factory, they're almost always going to be rounded. I'm not a big fan of the rounded saddles. And then you might say, well, what's wrong with them? Well, what's wrong with them, to me, it doesn't happen all the time. But if you get a little bit of a groove worn in there, now it can vibrate on that front edge of that saddle. In other words, like if you got a high spot in the middle of the saddle, then the front edge, now it's wore down in the middle, and now it's vibrating on the front edge of the saddle, if that makes sense to you. And it will, and you'll be going, where's that weird, I'm hearing this, people all the time come up to me and they go, I'm hearing this weird sound, I can't find it. And I go, it's in your saddle, you know. I mean, I can almost tell instantly. If the sound is when you're hitting an open string, and it's not a fret, I mean, if you're sure it's not a fret, and it's an open string, well, then it's either going to be in your nut or it's going to be in your saddle. And I say that, and that's not 100% true either, because nothing's 100% true. You can also hear buzzes from your tuning keys and from loose braces and all kinds of things. But there is a distinct sound that you can hear when it buzzes in your nut or when it buzzes in your saddle. So that's why I like to have the last place touching is those two inside edges. And then that's it. It can't buzz then. It's just black and white. It cannot buzz. Okay, I beat that to death. I hope that makes sense for you. Let's see, moving on. Tim Taylor, tool time. Okay. Is the light in your router battery operated or plug-in? No, it's a plug-in. He gave me a cord with it and everything, and you plug it into the wall, and it's awesome. It really is. Mike, let's see, moving on. Zappa says, Jerry, speaking of a paper-thin piece of wood missing from under a bridge, would a piece of paper there help? I wouldn't say that, well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have a huge problem with that because paper is wood, but I prefer to just make it a piece of wood if you could, you know. I would think you could do the paper thing if you really, you know, if that was your only option. The only problem with paper is that it is very fibrous and the fibers can typically separate, even like newspaper. If you put newspaper in between something and glue it, you can typically get it apart because the newspaper is not that solid. So I would prefer to use a solid piece of wood, but on the other hand, what you're saying is probably okay. I just would prefer the other option. Tall Red Easel says, Jerry, do you eat the ears or the tail first on a chocolate bunny? I think I eat whatever I can get in my mouth first. If it's the middle, it doesn't matter. When it comes to chocolate bunnies, man, I'm going to be eating the whole thing. Yeah, except on this diet, I'm not going to be eating any of them. Doggone it anyway. You know, let me just digress for just a second. I'm not going to get in a big thing on this, but then I'll take a little small piece of chocolate, real small, you know, not any huge bunny or anything, just a small piece, just to kind of reward myself, if you will. That way you don't feel like you're really suffering and missing out on everything. If you feel like you're suffering and missing out on everything, you'll never stick with it. It's that psychology thing. And I did take a lot of psychology classes, so I feel like I know what I'm talking about there. I took almost all electives with psychology in college. Okay, let's see. Rob Walker. Hi, Jerry. Can you use a filler to repair tear out with a glue stick to it? I don't recommend that. I really don't. I mean, if you really had to do that, then I would say at least, and here I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I would make it something like an epoxy type filler. And I don't like epoxy on instruments, so I wouldn't recommend it, Rob. It's really not any harder, believe it or not. I know it sounds crazy much harder. It's really not any harder to just route it out square and flat. It only takes you a couple seconds. Or if you can't route it, just take a chisel and clean it out. You know, scrape it and flatten it out with a chisel. Cut it, flatten it out with a chisel, and then just put yourself a new piece of flat wood in there. It's really not very hard to do. It sounds like it's hard, but honestly, it only takes a couple minutes. And I would definitely go that way rather than filling it. Bill Webb says, don't you dare stop doing shop talks. and your daily vlogs. Well, thank you, Bill. But honestly, they're falling off. They're not being as watched as much, so it's kind of sucks, but you know, it is what it is. My good viewers like you guys, you know I know I can count on you, so I appreciate it. And Bill, you're one of them. Why is the back harder? You talking about the back of a guitar or mandolin? If that's what you're talking about, which I think it is, it's a good question, and there's a good reason. The reason that it's harder is because that's your thing to bounce your sound back out. If everything was soft, your sound would probably still come out to some degree, but that it's just like an echo, you know, out on the mountain when you're, you know, if you're in a hard space area, when you scream out, it's going to echo back at you. Same kind of thing, same kind of principle on the back of an instrument. You want a good hardwood on the back of it, so it hits that and bounces right back out. If you don't have that hard there, then it's not going to be, you know, you're not going to get that crisp sound coming back out. And that's why, you know, like your mahogany guitar is going to have a little warmer, deeper tone sometimes than maybe your rosewood. But again, a lot of it depends on how everything's carved too, but I'm just talking about in general terms. If everything being equal, your softer wood like your mahogany is going to probably be a little bit warmer sound than your rosewood would. Me personally, I like that crisper, punchier sound of the rosewood. That's me. But everybody's different, you know. Gordon Bartlett, how do you tune the watermelon? I can't tune anything, so how could I tune a watermelon? I don't know. Let's see. Zappa, Jerry, I would suggest sycamore instead of maple binding. Yeah, sycamore is beautiful. It's a pretty binding, and it does bend easier than the maple does. But if you're going for the curly maple look, there's nothing that's going to give you that except for the curly maple. Now the sycamore binding, if it's quarter sawn, is got its own figure, and it looks nice, and it bends a whole lot easier than the maple does. So that's a good suggestion. Chord Matami, Chord Man Tommy, that's what it is, Chord Man Tommy. He says, hi Jerry, having a true problem. Open tuning is perfect, but when noting on any fret, my low E string is sharp. Only that string, the others are fine. You must be talking about a Martin guitar, because Martin guitars have that problem a lot. Now, I'm picking on Martin there. I don't mean to, but truly, I have seen lots of Martin guitars that have their bass E string sharp. If you get really picky, there are more strings sharp than just the bass E string, but the bass E string really shows it up. And all that means is that particular string is too short. It needs to be longer. In other words, you need to move your saddle back a little bit. And so in other words, if you could file the front of your saddle off and keep filing it off until you get close to the back, but again, there's a point of diminishing return, but file off as much of the front as you can, and that will help your problem. Right? And just do it on your E string, on your bass E string. It's really actually pretty common on Martin guitars, believe it or not. I've seen it a lot. A whole lot. As a matter of fact, Beverly, the girl that plays in our band, her Martin guitar is really bad for that. And, I don't think she wants me to take the bridge off of it and fix it. I told her, I said, if you just give it to me, I'll take the bridge off, make you a new bridge, put it all back, and you won't have that problem anymore. Anyway, we just have to wait and see. Roy Livingston, do you have plans on building a sawmill like yours? Oh, when you say do you have plans, I thought you meant like future plans. Am I going to do it again or something? No, I'm not going to do it again. No, I don't have any plans. I did that absolutely 100% by the seat of my pants. I mean, I was just out there, and I thought, well, how wide do I want it? 4 feet sounds good, so I made it 4 feet wide. You know, how long do I want it? I don't know, 20 feet sounds good, so I made it 20 feet long. Well, turned out longer would have even been better, but it's also really awkward when you make them longer. So really that 20 foot was about as long as I would want it to be. And you can't cut a 20-foot board on it, but you can cut a 16-foot board on it. So anyway, yeah, no, I don't have plans. I literally thought it up as I built it, and I put a lot of thought in it before I got the welder out, but basically I just built it on the fly, and it basically worked out. The only thing that I would do differently about it is I wasn't thinking it through, and I thought setting the blade right out on the very front and having the motor and everything right on the very front of it would work better and give me more length. Well, I didn't think it through, because you got to have something behind it to balance it out. And so really, had I just sat the thing in the middle, actually, if anything, I'd have gained more space that way. And it would have, it's a little teetery, and so I had to put some extra counterweights on the back of it. Had I not had to do that, it would have been better, but it still works pretty good. I think I see one here, David Tharp. Jerry, many of us can't watch when Shop Talk is live. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I do know that people are watching them after this too, by the way, and I understand that, and I appreciate it too. But still in all, compared to my regular videos, they're very low view counts. Bill Webb, why is it harder to make than the front? Oh, okay. Well, so I guess I didn't get his question right. Why is it harder to make the back than the front? Well, the back's just hard wood. It's a lot harder to carve. It's way harder on your fingers, and it takes longer because of that. You'll get, on a mandolin, if you didn't get blisters on the top, and you will, but if you didn't, I guarantee you will when you do the back. So, yeah, that's another reason I like to do the top first, which, you know, if you're doing the optimal, it'd probably be better to do the back first. That's not really true. It really is better to do the top first. But I always like to do the top first anyway, because that toughens my fingers up for when I get to the back. Because trust me, the back will wear your fingers out. Clyde Lewis gave me a super chat. Thanks for your weekly show. Long may it continue. Well, we'll try to keep it going there as long as we can. Anyway, Bill, I hope that answers your question. But that hardwood is just harder to carve. And boy, if you don't know that, you just start carving it, and you'll find it out really, really quick. Trust me, it's a huge difference. In fact, carving redwood, I mean, I've said before, you can't hardly make a bad instrument with redwood. And honestly, if you're trying to make a mandolin from your very first time, go with redwood. It carves like butter. I'm seriously telling you, there's no wood that carves easier than redwood. So make your top out of redwood, and you'll have a good sounding instrument. In fact, this instrument right here is redwood. And this was the second one I built. My first one, I made it out of western cedar, which is also softer than spruce. But the redwoods, it's like butter, man. I mean, it's so easy to carve, it's not even funny. So that's my best recommendation I can give you. If you're building one that needs to be carved on your first attempt, go with redwood. First of all, it's going to sound awesome. Second of all, it's going to be way easier on your fingers. Third, you're going to just be able to learn better because it's so much easier, and you're going to think, well, this isn't that hard. It's really the way to go. Start with redwood. You'll love me. You'll thank me. You'll bless me. There's a whole bunch of them scrolled up here all at the last second here. I thought I was done. The Man Cave Workshop is asking, do you get more guitar repairs than mandolins? Yeah, I think overall I do, though because I'm into the mandolin so much, a lot of people know that, and I do get a lot of mandolins too. But I would say on your average shop, you're definitely going to get a lot more guitars. And I probably still do here too, but I do get quite a few mandolins. Swartzy says, any advice for fret leveling a mandolin with no truss rod? Well, it's really no different, unless you have a huge underbow already, and if you do, then you got 3 or 4 options. One would be live with it, file it out, but it might come back. You know, it might get worse or something. The other option would be to maybe put in a little larger frets and I don't mean so much the tops of the frets. I'm talking about the tang. If you could find a fret wire that's got a slightly bigger tang, and maybe you don't even need to replace them all. Maybe you just replace 4 or 5 frets in the middle of your fretboard, and as long as the tops are the same, you could do that with a wider tang, and that'll help you get rid of that underbow. But otherwise, there's really no difference. I mean, this doesn't have a truss rod, and I do fret jobs on it. All my mandolins, the ones I've kept for myself, don't have truss rods. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. So anyway, you know, I hope that makes sense to you. Rick Hartley, awesome little song. I guess you were talking about the intro song, I hope. Well, thank you, Rick. Bill Porterfield, these are scrolling up awful fast now, guys. Slow down here. He skipped my question. Bill Porterfield says, I skipped his question. Well, I didn't do it intentionally. These things scroll up and down. It's really hard to keep it straight. Okay, I see it here, Bill. It says, is Zappa one Caleb Mills? No, he is not Caleb Mills. He seems to know a lot about Jerry's operation, and I would say that Zappa is one of my. I don't mean any disrespect here, Zappa, but I would say Zappa is probably one of my super fans, because I do see Zappa's comments all the time. He follows everything a lot. Yeah. So no, Bill, I don't think he is. You know, well, he's not Caleb Mills. I hope, by the way, that people did check out Caleb's video that he put out for April Fool's Day. He was doing a takeoff on the Woodwright shop and acting like, now I can't think of the guy's name, Roy, whatever his name is. I know his name. Anyway, Roy Underhill. So anyway, he was acting like Roy Underhill, and I thought it was kind of a cute video, and anyway, you might want to check that out. He did a good job on the instrument on top of it. So, all right, I'm moving back down here again, if I can find it. The Outboard Tinkerer 62, making them great again. That's the username. That's the username. Jerry, how do you recurve an old violin side that has relaxed from being unglued for years in one small area? So in other words, you got to, well, first of all, you got to realize that that's going to be brittle. It's going to want to break. Wood over time, I don't care how you've humidified it, I don't care what you've done to it, once it gets to be 150 years old, 200 years old, it changes properties just by nature, and it's going to be more brittle. And so you got to be real careful with that. In that case, I'd probably physically wet down the inside of it. I'd actually probably soak it, not soak it exactly, but I'd take a damp, a pretty wet cloth and wipe it down pretty good and get it really wet. And then be very careful about the bending. I mean, I would try to find some way to bend it where you could do it in very slow increments, keep it wet, and I would also try, if you could, to keep the metal on there if you can, because the metal keeps it from breaking out. And try to bend it with the metal again if you can do that. You got your work cut out for you. It's not easy to do. I hope that helps you. It's just going to be brittle, and you got to be really careful with it because it will break. Gotta Fly Lee says, what is between the two thickness sanders? Looks like some sort of swing blade with strings. Ha ha ha. Two thickness sanders. Oh! I know what you're talking about now. It's a music stand. Cash, I keep it handy because Cash likes to use it when he's here. I don't use one. That little music stand, I think I paid $8 for it, something like that, at a garage sale one day. I thought, man, that's worth it. It was worth $8, I thought. Kind of a good looking one. All right, moving on here. I think we just got a few more, but you guys keep adding them. What do you use your drum sander for? Drum sander, drum sander, drum sander, drum sander. Did I mention that somewhere along the line? Well, I do have one of those oscillating drum sanders. Am I thinking of the right word? Sometimes it's just, I have an oscillating drum sander and I use it for working on, even on the curves of a bridge. Like I'll get in here and do this, like this curved area. So that's what I use drum sanders for. Mostly it's just for curved areas like that. That's about it, really. James Kopp says, what do you, I think he told me how to say his name. I think it's Copy. Yeah, I think I remember him telling me that. So James Copy says, what do you think of the octave mandolins? Well, the truth is I don't think anything of them because I don't know anything about them at all. I truly don't. I don't have any basis of comparison. I've never played one. I've never used one. I've had them in the shop, just doing a setup or something on them here and there, but I've never bothered to mess with them. So I truly don't know a thing about them. I know like somebody like Sierra Hall can sure make them talk, but I truly don't know anything about them. And that's the truth. Steve MC or Steve Mac, I don't know how you say that username. I picked myself up a mandolin recently. It seems less resonant on the upper frets. Any thoughts? Well, as in upper frets, as in up the fretboard, or up the fretboard like toward the bass? Yeah, sometimes maybe I think too deep sometimes and should just go with the upper frets, which would be the higher frets. Yeah, mandolins are going to be thinner up there because that's just the way it is. You got such a tight wire and it's so short, But there are differences from mandolin to mandolin, so I don't know which mandolin you have or anything about it and how it's made. The only thing I would say is, generally speaking, if you want it to sound a little more depth, get the LS250s. That's about the only thing you can do to get yourself a good woodier sound. That's about it, really. I mean, there may be other ideas that other people have, but for me, that's probably your most straightforward way to do it. Get the GHS LS250s. Ray Lamoy, hi Jerry, what would cause my high E string to be dead on my Gibson Dove? Well, it can be a number of things. It can easily be your nut. If your nut isn't, a perfect straight angle, and so that the last place it's touching is right there, and it can also be your saddle, the exact same problem. The last place it's touching. Like if it's touching someplace else before it gets out in there where it's vibrating, that'll cause it to be dead sounding and weird sounding for sure. So that's probably my biggest guess is why it's sounding dead, and that's a good guess because it happens a lot. And another thing, and I've said this many times before, but don't be afraid to widen the slot in that nut. People want those things so dang tight, and your string can be riding on the sides of that and not getting to the bottom of your nut. And that will cause deadness also. So, just make sure that it's in the bottom of the slot on your nut and that the angle is perfect. When you take your string out, look at that, and you'll see a dark spot where the string is riding. And if the dark spot's in the middle, there's your problem. If the dark spot goes the full length of it and comes all the way out to the front edge, then that's probably not your problem. But I hesitate saying what else it might be. Typically, that's going to be it. I mean, that's usually what causes a dead sounding E string. Okay, the drum sander behind me. This thickness sander, that I don't think of that as a drum sander, but I guess it kind of is. For me, I always think of drum sanders as being the vertical ones. I don't know why. But this thickness sander here, I don't really do much with it, to be truthful. Whenever I have some wide piece of wood, I'll throw it through there. It's not that accurate. I was kind of disappointed when I got it, and I spent hours making it accurate. This one's probably as accurate as any one that you'll ever find anywhere. I mean, it's that accurate. I've spent hours getting it just perfect and running a piece of wood through here and then running it through there and measuring it, you know, and all that stuff. And it's pretty accurate, but it's still nowhere near as accurate as the one that I made. And so I just use the one I made for the most part. So I do run big things through there sometimes, rough things. That's about all I use it for, is roughing. That's about it. I kind of use it a little bit, like whenever I can't plane a piece of wood down, like on my planer, then I'll sand it down with that thing. Because, and you might say, well, why can't you plane it down? Well, because they chip. A lot of real hardwoods will just bust out, excuse me, and will chip and just throw splinters everywhere when you run them through a planer. But you can run it through a sander, and it might burn, but at least it won't bust the wood. And so that's the only time I really use it, is just whenever something I can't plane, or, you know, just some wide piece that won't fit through my regular little sander. Larry A., what video was it where you had a wig on to impersonate Caleb? That would have been probably last year's either Halloween or April Fool's, or year before last, actually. So I don't know the number or anything. I couldn't tell you. Thanks for reminding me. Tim Paul, I'm referring to the white thickness sander behind you. Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I covered that now. But I don't use it that much. I hardly ever use it, really. The Man Cave Workshop, do you keep a first aid kit in your shop? Well, so one of my wonderful viewers sent me a bunch of Band-Aids. I mean, like, he sent me a whole big box full of small boxes of Band-Aids. I got more Band-Aids than Carter's got liver pills. So I keep lots of Band-Aids around, and I need them. You know, the people that don't have these accidents, you know, I hope I don't offend anybody, but those are the people that generally don't do anything. They talk big show, but they don't do anything. If you get out and work like I do, and you're always into machinery, and you're always into things with sharp edges and tools and things that can cut your hands off, you're going to get hurt. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. It's just going to happen. And you can be as careful as you want to be, and you know, you can think that you're above it, but just about that moment, that's when it's going to hit you, you know. And I don't think I'm above it, trust me. I know I can get hurt. And I try to keep that in mind on every single thing I do. And especially when it comes to something like a joiner that's going to take your whole hand off or finger off, or the table saw or something like that. I'm really careful with those things. And I try to stay out of the way of the flying parts, because they're going to hurt you. And I do try to wear my safety glasses most of the time when I'm in there grinding and stuff. And I say most of the time because I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I do 100%, but I try to do 100%, but I do it most of the time for sure. That's going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. 175 viewers. At least we peaked on the high note there. So thank you, guys. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for all the thumbs up. I'll see you at least by Monday, if not sooner. And look for some videos coming out this weekend. One about a banjo and a mandolin probably, and the other one about good old Cash singing a wonderful gospel song for Easter morning. We'll see you then. Bye.